I'm a planner with Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council. Welcome to our fall local government workshop session on skills that make great board members. As I understand, this is a fairly new session. Our friends are here from Department of State, Paula Gilbert and Ebony Mapp, and I will let them introduce themselves in just a moment. I'm going to run through some logistical items quickly, and then we'll get started because we have a lot of stuff to cover this afternoon. If you are a local government official and you are here for training credit hours, please make sure your full name is visible as a participant, or send me a direct message in the chat room or an email so we can make sure that you receive credit and documentation for your attendance today. We are recording this session, and barring any technical difficulties, we will be posting it on the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council YouTube channel. You should have all received the PDF of the slides for today's session that Department of State provided for us. And we do ask that everybody please remain muted during the presentation. We hopefully will have a little bit of time for some questions and answers, but feel free to use the chat room during the session, and I will be monitoring that for any questions you might have. And then finally, in the event of any technical difficulties, hopefully the meeting will continue, and I will rejoin shortly if there's any problems on my end. But we'll keep our fingers crossed that the technology gods are with us today. I think that's everything from my end. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I will turn it over to Ebony Mapp and Paula Gilbert from New York State Department of State. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to train with our friends in Western New York. My name is Paula Gilbert, and I am joined with Ebony Mapp, and we are local government specialists at the New York Department of State Division of Local Government Services. And we offer technical assistance and training to mostly planning and zoning board members, but all local officials in New York State. We are one of those resources that are there for you. I don't know if Ebony, do you want to chime in, or should we just get started?
Let's just jump in. Hi, everyone.
Right. So this course was developed over probably about a year or so ago. I think we started it first. We rolled it out during COVID. And it was really from a couple of county planners had asked us about providing maybe a basic skills class that's outside of just our overview of what you do in a planning board or what you do as a zoning board member. And, you know, some of the fundamental skills that you might need to be a successful board member. So we'll go over some of those today. And so it's based on more for beginners, but I think everybody gets a little something out of this course. So hopefully you'll feel the same. So the very beginning, New York State is a home rule state, which means the majority of our land use decisions are made on the local level, and local governments hold the power to regulate land. And as a board, as a land use board member, the decisions you make have a very long and lasting impact in your community. This responsibility should not be taken lightly, and that's why well-skilled board members are so important in every community. And this is just an overall slide, but an effective board member knows the authority of the board and its duties, the standards for decision-making by the board, some of the legal aspects of board content, our conduct, including bylaws and rules of procedure, the regulations, laws, and plans applicable to your board. That includes things like the comprehensive plan, your zoning law, subdivision regulations, site plan review, special use permits, etc. How to read and interpret your plans, maps, conduct site visits, where to seek assistance. And you should really know what's happening in your own community with local planning and development trends. We'll cover a little bit of all of these issues this afternoon. So we'll begin with land use control and local government. Really, land use control is one of those most important functions of local government. Because of this, you'll see that a large portion of local news coverage is often about local government issues, including land use. It can be obviously very polarizing and controversial for board members, for local officials, for residents, for everybody in your community. However, it's important to note that land use board members are just administering land use regulations as they're written, and it's really the duty of your local governing board to adopt and amend those regulations. And every municipality is different, but the local government team usually consists of all the people on this slide. So it starts with the municipal clerk, who might handle filing, posting of meetings, also filing decisions. Your board secretary, that might be the person receiving applications and checking for completeness and offering administrative support to you and your board. Your code or zoning enforcement officer, sometimes that's the same person. They are often tasked with zoning and building code enforcement. You may or may not have a planner or a planning department in your community, and they often provide professional and technical support to boards. And then, of course, there's other people like your municipal council who are there to provide legal support to you, a municipal engineer, which is important for subdivision or some of the site plan reviews that might come through. And of course, the chief administrator, whether that's a city mayor, village mayor, or town supervisor, and they supervise the day-to-day operations of your municipality. And so briefly, just the primary functions of the local governing board, because all of the power and authority in a local government begins with the governing board. They have home rule authority under legislative powers. The New York State Constitution grants local governments pretty fairly broad home rule powers to adopt local laws on all sorts of different various subjects. They also have police power, which is the power government has to provide for public order, peace, and to protect health, safety, and general welfare. Land use controls are an exercise of the police power. They also create local laws, ordinances, and resolutions that relate to all matters of local governance. And then on the administrative side, they obviously act as supervisory role of overseeing the day-to-day operations of your municipality. They are also responsible for municipal budgeting, as well as entering contracts and agreements, as well as purchasing and procurement policies, and appointive, which is important to reach because the governing board appoints members of the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, the zoning enforcement officer, building inspector, your code enforcement officer, your attorney, secretary. So you need to be appointed with those people. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ebony to talk about the planning board.
Okay, thanks so much. So, the primary functions of a planning board. Well, the planning board plays both a regulatory and advisory role in local government. Both roles apply to how land is used. So when it comes to advisory, the planning board can make official comments on any land use matter in their local municipality, whether they're asked or not. So for instance, they can tell the governing board, hey, it's time to update our zoning code, or it's time to update our comp plan. And they can even weigh in with regard to the ZBA's review of a variance application. They can advise the ZBA on what they think would be the best way to address or answer a variance request. Now, with regard to its regulatory powers, those are powers that are like on specific land use matters that the governing board gives the planning board the power to make decisions on, and the power to review. And things like that could be site plans or special use permits. And of course, subdivision review is a regulatory power as well, but that power does not come from the governing board. That comes from New York State statute. So it is a regulatory power, but that power comes from New York State statute, not the governing board. I'm having trouble advancing. I'm not
Nope,
sure.
you
Oh,
just got it. It was saying it was waiting for you to control access, but I see that you finally have it. So
got
it's a
it.
little wonky. If it gets still acts more wonky, we can maybe just have one of us do the slides
Yeah,
instead.
that works. Okay, now with regard to the ZBA only has a regulatory role, and there's a key distinction in how that's carried out. They have what's called appellate jurisdiction and or original jurisdiction. Now, appellate jurisdiction, that's when you have land use matters that are referred to the ZBA, usually from someone else, like an applicant's interaction with the ZEO, with the zoning enforcement officer, maybe because they want to do something on their property, or possibly because they have already done something on their property and they have received a violation. And so they need to remedy that violation. And so they are referred to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Right. And all ZBAs have appellate jurisdiction. There's no ZBA that does not. Original jurisdiction, however, are land use matters that start or originate with the zoning board itself. And they're part of the powers that the ZBA has been delegated by the local governing board. So that could be like a special use permit or a site plan review. If the local governing board has said, we want the role, the job of reviewing these particular applications to be the role of the zoning board, then that's original jurisdiction. It starts with the ZBA. I didn't give an example of appellate, but an appellate jurisdiction, an example of that could be interpreting a zoning regulation or applying for a variance. Okay, now any bird worth its bird, we're not talking about birds, we're talking about boards, right? Any board worth its salt should govern themselves in an orderly manner, right? That just goes without saying. A great way to do this is to establish rules of procedure and then, of course, follow them. Rules of procedure include all that's on this slide. Duties, so basically, what the decision-making powers that you have been granted and what you can specifically review. How and when agendas are set and meetings are called, like, establishing the order of business. Your rules of procedure should outline what is acceptable conduct by attendees of meetings and hearings, what's acceptable conduct of, board members, not just board members, but the public, right? When they're both attending these meetings and hearings. It should outline a timeline to draft and finalize minutes. And how do you prepare the meeting minutes? It should include who signs off on official documents. Is it the board chair? Is it the director or commissioner, if you have one? Whatever that looks like in your particular municipality, that should be described in your rules of procedure. And also, it should also include, under what circumstances will an application be referred for additional review? There is such a thing called county referral, and it's triggered by specific distance requirements. And so it should indicate, when that needs to be sent over to get their feedback on an application. Rules of procedure they should set clear standards for how business should be conducted. And really, it's good for both seasoned and new members alike. I will always say I think board members should avoid mimicking each other, because you may be picking up mistakes. Just like when you're learning to drive, if you're learning to drive by someone who, has gotten a little lax over the years, you may pick up some of their mistakes and end up not driving properly, or, not getting your license or what have you. So when it comes to rules of procedure, everyone should know and understand them. They should know and understand their duties, because having and knowing the rules of procedure helps to keep everyone sharp. Now, if you don't have rules of procedure, like you're inspired to create some, or maybe you just feel guilty, like you should, just ask us for samples. We have a variety of samples from different municipalities, so you do not have to recreate the wheel, when in creating these rules of procedure for your municipality. Be ethical. I would hope that this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Please be ethical. You have power as a public officer but you've also been given the public's trust to handle public business in a professional and ethical manner. Your job isn't just to make decisions, but also to promote confidence and trust while conducting public business. Your behavior makes a difference in how the whole process is perceived, right? It doesn't just have an impact on how you're perceived, but the process, the people that are associated with you in the process, and the government, your local government as a whole. And you carry all that on your shoulders. So again, be ethical. Being ethical is a broad concept, but one key area to avoid are, especially in local government, are conflicts of interest. That's like a financial or contractual benefit or relationship like nepotism that relates to any application or violation that's in your authority to review. When these kinds of things arise, it is time to recuse yourself. Bow out of voting and debating on an application and have it noted for the record that you did so, because you want to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. I can't stress that enough. Every municipality has a code of ethics that addresses its conflict of interest. Please become familiar with it. Again, it's required by New York State statute, so it is there in every municipality. So again, please become familiar with it. But you might be asking yourself, how do I know whether something is a conflict of interest? Well, one thing that you can do is ask yourself, could there appear to be a conflict? Because again, you always want to avoid even the appearance of a conflict. And so to do that, you want to always err on the side of caution and disclose any real or potential conflicts that are related to business ties, personal connections, potential or current litigation, and things like that, and offer to recuse yourself and let the board decide if it's a conflict or not. Have that discussion during the meeting and make the decision there. Make the offer to recuse yourself, let the board decide what needs to happen, and then go from there. And an alternate can serve in your place. This is one of the main reasons why alternates are allowed by New York State statute, so that someone can, so that you can continue to conduct business. Now, if nothing else, if you have offered to recuse yourself and the board has discussed it at the meeting and said, no, actually, we don't think this is a conflict of interest. We think you're good. Let's move forward. If that is challenged in the future, you can easily point to the record, right? And say, hey, we had a discussion about this. I did say that I had this issue. We did discuss it in the meeting, and it was determined that it was not a conflict of interest. Again, you're just showing your due diligence around the issue of being ethical. Also, you'll want to avoid receiving gifts either directly or indirectly. In my last municipality, I had a colleague who worked at the mayor's office who refused to take door prizes, even if it was at a municipal event. And it might seem a bit extreme to be that way, to be that adamant about it, but she was really adamant about maintaining her professional reputation. And, so because of that, no one could ever say, oh, well, I gave her this and, in exchange for, or I saw her take something in exchange for this benefit later on. No one could ever say that about her. She was squeaky clean because she avoided even the appearance of a conflict of interest. In general, you want to avoid gifts that are $75 or more, but really a good rule of thumb, and this is what I try to do, would be to avoid anything beyond something like what you would get at a conference, like a pen, a magnet, things that would be available to everyone. I would not go anything beyond that. It just keeps things easier and cleaner that way. And I think I'll pass, not the ball, but the screen to Paula.
Great, thanks. All right, so the comprehensive plan, we're not going to go over a big thing, but it's of course really important to discuss because of the fact that it serves as the basis for all land use decisions. It's the expression of your goals and recommended action to achieve those goals. It provides an outline for orderly growth, providing continued guidance for decision making. It provides the basis for all of your other land use tools to try to get to that, like your zoning, design guidelines, etc. And it's a statement of the municipality's goals, policies, and standards. And really, no matter what application that comes before you, whether you're on a planning board or a zoning board, you should really be referring back to that comprehensive plan look at the goals, see if the project that's before you is in harmony with the goals of that plan. If it is, great. If it's not, then maybe it needs some work. Maybe it doesn't fit in great in your community. So some elements of a comprehensive plan, they cover a variety of matters. They can be very big, like hundreds of pages of documentation. They could also be very small in some communities, as small as things like maybe 10 pages. And they cover basically everything, but you'll see mostly in them things like goals and policies, your existing conditions, because how do you know where to go from here if you don't know where you're at right now? Things like housing, we've seen big changes over the past couple of years. A good idea to always go back and take a look. Infrastructure, it's aging in most places in upstate New York, so it's important to look back at to see what needs done. Other topics like energy and sustainability, we're seeing again a lot of changes in these industries. Your comprehensive plan might be, if it's older than 10 years, quiet on some of these issues, and you might want to go back and update it. And, you know, transportation and walkability, it's especially important after COVID. People are looking to do things outside and get out there. So if you're a community that values walking, you know, maybe that's something that you want to look at in applications that come before you. And knowing your comprehensive plan, it's not just knowing where it is, it's about knowing the goals inside it. You want to base your land use decisions on the plan's goals and the community vision for the future, not on your own personal opinions. And are the applications in harmony with these goals? If so, the project might be a good fit for your community. If not, maybe you're going to deny it or suggest changes or impose better conditions on it. If you're a community that has like a comprehensive plan that says we really value walkability here, and maybe a flashy developer comes before you and they have maybe a proposed, you know, senior housing complex, and everybody's like, oh, this looks great, it's awesome, you know, everybody wants this, like it might be great, but then, you know, if it doesn't have sidewalks or connectivity to a bus line or for people to be able to get around without necessarily having to drive, and you have a goal in your comprehensive plan that says we really value walkability and connectivity in our community, then maybe it's not in harmony. You know, maybe that's where you have to go back and ask questions of the, you know, developer and say, hey, you know, we really like these things. Is there an opportunity to put sidewalks in there so people can get around? And usually, you know, a lot of times, if you can point to your comprehensive plan, you're probably going to get what you want. So, and of course, zoning, like I said, site plan, subdivision, design guidelines, they're all just merely tools to drive your comprehensive plan. And a good tip on this one is have a copy of your comprehensive plan at your meetings for reference and guidance. We hate when communities go through the whole comprehensive planning process because it's pretty extensive. So then just say, okay, it's adopted, and then just put it on a shelf in the library and nobody ever looks at it again. You know, you want to make sure that you're the community that has the plan that looks pretty well loved and well used at the meeting. And like I said, caring for our comprehensive plans, you know, they need to have short, medium, and long-term range goals. It makes it less daunting. Like, you might be a community that really wants to work and make yourselves better, but a lot of times, you know, you can't just have a plan that just has all long-term goals saying like, we're just going to turn it around. You need to kind of start chipping away at it with little small steps that get you that way. So again, the best comprehensive plans have some of those short-term and long-term goals. They're usually in a matrix at the back of the plan itself, and it's something that you can always just kind of go back to and see, are we doing this? Do we need to change something to make this work? Are we, you know, is this totally unattainable and maybe we need to think differently about this in the future? It's going back to that, evaluating it on a regular basis, just to make sure that you're trying to achieve the goals of the plan itself. And, you know, be an advocate for your plan. The plan is a sword. It can be used defensively and offensively. So if you get heat from the public or your governing board about a decision you're making, you can point back to the plan and say, here's what we're basing our decisions on. It's there to help you. and adjust your plan as necessary. Sometimes things happen, like maybe you have a major employer and they leave your community. You know, that's going to leave a big gap in municipal finance. It's going to have long-term impacts. You know, that's an opportunity to maybe go back, evaluate, and adjust your plan, and revise and update your plan every 5 to 10 years. That's a best case scenario. The comprehensive planning statutes says that you have to input some kind of review process in. It doesn't say how long it has to be, but typically in planning, they say every 5 to 10 years. And you know what, if you're that bored and you don't have a ton going on, maybe the winter time is quiet and you sit on a planning board and maybe you don't have the money to update your plan, you don't have to update your whole plan at once. You can take a chapter and just say, okay, housing market has really changed in our community. Let's look at this and see what we can do to try to chip away at updating this. So, you don't need to have like this super fancy, flashy consultant. It can be something that's very basic, but as long as it's really connected to your community, that's the most important thing, and that you're going to actually use it and help make those decisions in the future. And of course, zoning. The goal, of course, is to avoid incompatible land uses, like not putting the sriracha plant next to the residential neighborhood. It divides your municipality into districts. At its most basic, you might be a small community that has 2 zoning districts where you restrict in one district and then everything else is allowed in the other. It regulates land use, density, and the placement of structures on parcels. It is also optional. Not every municipality in New York State has zoning. It is adopted by the governing board, so you need to have their cooperation to update it, which sometimes is more difficult in some communities over others. And it should be updated after the adoption of your comprehensive plan, because the plan guides you for the next future, then you update all of your regulations afterwards. And here, caring about our zoning regulations, some symptoms of a sick zoning regulation might include many interpretations or variances being sought or granted, or there's outdated terms and language. Things like in the zoning code we'd see maybe 20 years ago, you'd see things about, movie rental stores, which, in the advent of online Netflix, HBO Max, Disney Plus, those don't really exist. In fact, I think there's only one movie rental chain left, and it's in Western New York, but it might not be in your community. And there are new technologies available. Your existing code might be silent on things like solar or 5G or cannabis regulations. These are new things that are new uses that are emerging that you need to maybe update your zoning code to reflect. And confusion on definitions, wording, etc. So is it a deck or a dock? Does a restaurant include food trucks or sit-down restaurants? COVID changed a lot of that. We've seen even restaurants, pop up in places and, that you never really saw before. And, like your comprehensive plan, our zoning regulations need to be periodically reviewed to make sure that they're achieving the goals of your comprehensive plan. So, I know it's easy to say this, sometimes it's easier said than done, but that's the basics on comprehensive plan and on our zoning regulations. So now we're going to look more at the technical skills you need to have with plats and our reading maps and plans. And I'm going to turn it over to Ebony to do that.
Okay, thanks. I keep getting all these pop-ups on my screen. In any case, so we're going to take a look at plans and maps and plats. Generally, the review of any application that's going to come before you, whether you're a planning board or a ZBA, usually requires an ability to read and understand maps. Almost every application will require the inclusion of a map, even if it's just a simple Google map or vicinity map to help you to get your bearings as you consider whatever's being requested. There's one exception to this, and that would be a zoning interpretation by the ZBA that there's no real reason for a map to be included with something like that generally, so that probably will not, they will not have one, but everything else should have a map. We also know that a map is a physical illustration of existing features, resources, or uses on the ground surface, but there are many kinds and they serve different purposes. And during your service, regardless of which board you're on, you'll encounter a variety of them during that time. And we'll go through some of them now. Oops, go back. Okay. Planimetric map. This is a basic map, like a Google map, that could also be called a vicinity map. It usually shows street names, roads, highways, and may include building footprints as well. This kind of map should be part of every application, as I said earlier. I mean, it helps you get your bearings, lets you know where the site is located within your community from a bird's eye view. Next, we'll take a look at topographic maps. There we go. It shows the topography or terrain of a site. It shows the lay of the land, so to speak. It uses contour lines to describe the steepness of a terrain, like a hill, and then the depths of depressions, like the valleys, downward slopes, ditches, things like that. It's a way to show that the land has, it's a way to show land in like a three-dimensional image on a flat sheet of paper. Because you can't hand in like a science project that looks, it's like a sheet of paper, but it has, a mountain or a volcano coming out the top of it. You can't hand in something like that, right? You can't hand in anything beyond paper. So, it's another way to just show the lay of the land in a 3D way on a flat sheet of paper. The contour lines are spaced out by a certain number of feet called intervals. And those intervals are what measure the steepness or the depth. And really, depending on what that topographic map is intended to show, the spacing may be different rather. So, on one topographic map you get for one project, they may have intervals of 10 feet between each contour line. But then on a different site, because you're looking at something different and it's a larger site, maybe you'll have intervals of 50 feet between each line. It really depends on, what the terrain is and what else that map is intending to show. We'll also take a look at zoning maps. Oops. There we go. A zoning map just shows the various zoning districts that are in your community. It outlines that, and it also outlines the specific boundaries of each district. The most common zones are residential, commercial, and industrial, but that zoning map could include a host of other types of zoning districts. It just depends on what's going on in your community, what your municipality has decided your district should have. Your zoning should have in terms of districts. So that it can include zoning districts like a natural areas district. It could be, you could have an open space zoning district. You could have special districts that are like for instance, an entertainment district. Let's say you have a river in your municipality that's a hot spot for activity, and there's bars and restaurants and things near that, a boardwalk, for instance. That could be your entertainment district, depending on what municipality you're in. So that could be a special district. It could also, your zoning map could also show overlays, like for that same river area, you might have a riparian buffer that does not allow development within a certain distance from that river's boundaries. And so again, your zoning map should show all of the districts that are present in your community. And also, you know this about zoning, there may be multiple levels in each district. There might be a residential district, but there's multiple levels to that residential district. There's R1, R2, R3. The districts increase in intensity, and of course, all of them should be shown on your zoning map. And it's usually color-coded and labeled, making it easy to identify districts at a glance. Not that you'll have these memorized, of course, but again, it just makes it easy to distinguish, where each zoning district is and and where it stops in relation to another zoning district. Site plan maps. A site plan is a rendering, drawing, or sketch that shows the arrangement, layout, and design of the proposed use on a single parcel of land. It basically shows everything that's happening on a site. It shows building placement, parking design. It may include fencing, landscaping, lighting. It shows a single parcel of land, its boundaries, and its adjacent streets. You'll see many of these in your service, even if you're not reviewing a site plan application, because again, a site plan lays out everything that's happening on a piece of property. Site plans are, even if it's not a site plan application, site plans are often needed to review other requests like variances or special use permits, because again, they illustrate what the applicant is trying to do or change on a parcel of land. Next, we'll talk about subdivision maps, or excuse me, subdivision plat. Why is this not? Okay. Subdivision is a division of any parcel of land into a number of lots, blocks, or sites as specified in the local ordinance, law, rule, or regulation. And it may present with or without streets or highways for the purposes of sale, the transfer of ownership, like a donation, for instance, or for development. This map shows a large area divided into multiple parcels of land that are labeled as lots. Those are the lots that we commonly refer to in everyday conversation. Now, only the planning board are allowed to review these, and that's as required by New York State statute. So ZBA should not be reviewing subdivisions. However, the ZBA may review a variance request that is related to a subdivision approval. So there's some adjacency there, but the ZBA should not be reviewing subdivision applications. Subdivision plats always include detailed measurements of the parcel that define its shape in words, and that's called a legal description. And you'll see on this image here, I don't know, you probably can't read it, but right below where it says Juniper Reserve Division 1, there's a written description of what this property is and where it is in relation to the lots around it. And it's kind of like a different language. But again, it's another way to describe the boundaries of the parcel, and it's needed. It's needed for notices. It's needed for professionals who will be actually building on the site. It's important to know these boundaries. And again, so that'll be listed on the plat. It may also, well, actually, it may or may not show proposed streets, but it should show lot lines, existing and adjacent streets, and proposed locations of utilities and a variety of other details. It's not going to show the development that's proposed. That'll be on your site plan, but in terms of, the lay of the land, that'll show, that'll be on your subdivision map and your topography map. The EAF mapper, we'll go back, is a tool created by the Department of Environmental Conservation. It's really a great tool, and it's meant to make incorporating seeker into your application review process as easy as possible. When you say seeker, sometimes folks kind of groan or whatever. There's some discomfort with the process, but seeker is really meant to make it easier. Seeker is about gathering information, and so you can think of the mapper as kind of an information clearinghouse. All you have to do is put the address of the site into the database, and then it'll provide information that helps the applicant fill out part 1 of the EAF, the environmental assessment form. And so it saves time and money because the information is accurate, it is free, and it's all in one place. And it saves who knows how much money in terms of looking for and procuring data from a variety of sources that's needed to, the variety of sources that are needed to diligently review what's happening on a particular piece of property. Other mapping resources are like the GIS Clearinghouse. This allows you to, my slide, I'm talking, but my slide is not, there we go. The New York State GIS Clearinghouse. You can download data from this clearinghouse if you have GIS. Another resource is from our own department, the Office of Planning and Development, in community infrastructure. The GIS Gateway is one of their products, and or services rather, and it offers specific data sets specifically around water. So inland water, waterways, coastal waterways. It's really a valuable resource for waterfront communities, especially if they're pursuing, funds through our department, through Department of State. And I will pass this to Paula now. Hopefully you can advance the slides better than I could.
Oh my gosh, I know. If you want, I can just keep doing it from now on, if that would make it a little easier.
Yes, I think so.
I don't know if it was because I was typing in the chat box. It seemed like every time you went to change, like, I don't know what was going on. It's crazy, but yeah, I can do that from now on. It's all good. Anyways, so the next part is let's looking at some practical and legal tips for preparing for your meetings every month. Quorum is very basic. It's at least a majority of a fully constituted board to be able to legally conduct business in the public realm. And that includes meetings, hearings, voting, you name it. You need to usually have a quorum to do any of the public's business. Like I said, fully constituted board means it includes any absences or vacancies. So if you're a board of 5, and let's say one of the seats is still unappointed, you still need to have 3 people to establish a quorum to do the public's business. And you can use alternates for conflicts of interest, and you can use them for absences as long as it's allowable by local law. So alternates are spoken about in state statute for conflicts of interest, but you can do it for absences, again, if it's on your own local law. And it's a good idea because, you know, you don't want to have all of the applicants come to the meeting and everybody gathers and then you find out, oh my gosh, we can't even do anything because we can't even achieve quorum. So it's always good to have alternates around, not just for, you know, conflicts of interest, but they could step in if, you know, somebody has an emergency and can't make the meeting. So before the meeting, you want to comply with open meetings law noticing for all meetings, including agenda setting meetings. We'll talk about that in a couple slides. Your chair should, most of the time it's the chair, but they may produce or prepare the agenda and decide the order of applications. That might change depending on what's the business before you. It might be new versus old business. It might be based on complexity, or you might have media attention there. So you might want to do the media attention, you know, application first so that, you know, reporters can get in and out, and then you can move on to all the other business down the agenda. The chair, again, should ensure that a quorum is there, invite and confirm the appropriate staff, consultants, attorney, etc. Schedule the appropriate venue. If there's something that's, you know, really controversial before your board and you know that there's going to be a lot of people that show up, maybe your regular meeting space is not going to be adequate enough. Maybe you need to move it to the auditorium in your building, or maybe a gymnasium. So think about that as you're coming up to the meeting itself. A big one, ensure any technology is up and running when it's needed. Technology can be a headache for all of us. Like, I totally get it. We're having issues with just advancing slides today. So always test things before you do it. It might all still, you know, fly out the window at the time, but at least you could say that you tried. Post your meeting materials, including applications, maps, etc., online prior to the meeting so that the public can review the proposals before the board. This is extremely important. If you have a fully or a high-speed internet access, open meetings law just changed last week to include that you need to post this stuff on your website at least 24 hours before meeting to the extent practicable. You know, if high-speed internet isn't necessarily a given in your community, that's understandable. But the idea is that we're trying to be as transparent as possible. You want the sunshine in. You know, you don't want to be the municipality that's known for maybe not being so open. And how you can support the review process, you need to know the first person an applicant's going to go to. Most likely, you know, sometimes people are coming to you for very minor, maybe area variance, or they're asking for a fence or whatnot. You know, these are people that are not experts in land use, you know, law and procedure. So, you know, and going to your, you know, local government sometimes can be kind of intimidating for some people. Standing before a board can be very intimidating for people. So it's important for you as board members to understand how the process works for, you know, your neighbor, so that, you know, you'll understand it. It puts people, I think, more at ease. So is the person going to come into the office? Are they going to talk to your zoning enforcement officer, or is there a clerk that's there, or your town clerk? Are they going to, you know, who are they going to talk to first? And then, you know, you might have shared permit tracking in your community, because some applications can be extremely complex and require 2 or 3 different departments to review. You know, things like subdivision or telecommunication applications have strict deadlines. So you want to make sure that you're using checklists and other measures so that you're not missing, you know, a step in the process. And then, you know, you get towards the end of that time where you need to make a decision, and then you realize, oh no, we don't have everything that we need. And of course, understanding each board's role and responsibility. If you're on a planning board, understanding what your zoning board is up to. If you're on a zoning board, understanding what your planning board's doing. In the best of terms, you have good working relationships between the two. Sometimes that includes sharing your staff. You know, your clerk is probably a clerk to not only your board, but to the other boards as well. It's good to just kind of have that good neighborly communication open between everybody that's handling land use issues in your community. Be familiar with your municipal land use applications. You know, if you're sitting on a zoning board of appeals, just know what are you asking applicants to come forward with. If you don't really personally understand some of the questions on your applications, then most likely nobody's going to understand what you're asking on your applications. You want things to be clear and concise. So it's always good to go back just to make sure that you're, you know, crossing your T's and dotting your I's, because you might have the same stuff that you've used for years and everybody might think, oh yeah, this totally works and everybody understands it. But then, you know, a new member comes on and they're like, I don't totally understand this, you know, this question. And it might be a good opportunity to go back and, you know, make things a little bit more user-friendly. Do you have a frequently asked questions section or guide for new applicants? This can be really helpful. If you don't have one of these, we can send you samples from other communities for illustrative purposes. But I think that's really a good idea. I think the handouts that we sent you also has a kind of guide to applicants from a different municipality. So that's always a good thing to have. Again, big proponents of checklists to keep track of submissions. You know, you want a checklist for your applicants so that they can say, okay, I could check all these things off, because they might have to send you, you know, 10 different copies of things, and it might have, you know, 10 different, you know, inclusions that they have to keep. So it's good for them. It's good for you, for municipal staff and board members as well. It just keeps everybody more organized, I find. And you want to incorporate those timelines. Beware, again, of default approvals on subdivisions 62 days after the close of the public hearing. For things like telecommunications, you might only have 90 days for coexisting poles. So that's not a long time, and that includes all of the municipalities' review. So you want to make sure that, you know, you're doing the very best. You don't want to be the, you know, community that unfortunately drops the ball sometimes. So you want to review your application materials before you go to the meeting. You can't, you know, reach a fair and impartial decision without a firm understanding of the matters before you. So board members should, in a perfect world, receive your applications and meeting materials at least 1 week prior to the meeting. Before the meeting, make sure that you're setting aside some time to review all the materials submitted. If you have questions, prepare a list of questions or concerns about each application so that when you get to the meeting, you're ready to work, because you might have a lot of things before you and you don't want to be the board member that's saying like, oh, I wasn't able to look at the minute meeting or the meeting minutes. So, everybody has to stop and wait for you to look at them. You just want to be ready and willing and able to work when you get to the meeting. And visit the property to understand the application. Ebony is going to talk a little bit about conducting site visits, which are really important as well. And let's see, the agenda setting meeting or workshop. So sometimes in some communities, you meet together before the meeting to discuss how you're going to set up the meeting, how making sure that you don't have conflicts of interest. If you're meeting as a group, it means that it is subject to the open meetings law. So your rules of procedure should cover who sets your agenda. A lot of the times it's the chair. You want to ensure that the applications are complete and ready for board review, because that's frustrating as well if an applicant comes before you and they think that, their hearing is going to happen tonight, and then you realize, okay, they didn't actually submit everything that you need to make a decision. So this is where agenda setting meetings can be really important and helpful. And you can determine ahead of chance that if you're going to have a conflict of interest or if you're going to need alternates. But if you're meeting as a group, the idea is that it's open, it's subject to open meetings law. Don't do it behind closed doors. And one thing before we move on is really when you get things sent to you, you might have it sent to you in your email. As a group, like, try not to deliberate anything about applications before you via email. It's just not really, it's not a good thing to do. You really want to do all of the work in the public realm. So besides answering basic questions like, are you going to be able to meet, or if you're going to be able to make the meeting, or do you have all the application materials? Like, really, it shouldn't go much beyond that in terms of email. And of course, you might have planning and enforcement staff. So you're going to be working with all different sorts of people as you sit as a board member. So it's important for you to understand their roles and responsibilities as well. If you are a bigger municipality that has maybe a planning staff, they might be the people that are reviewing the applications first and coordinating land use review. They also could assist with updating your regulations. They advise land use boards often. So if there's questions about something, they're usually the first line that you would turn to. They sometimes can meet with developers and residents and property owners, and they're really the voice of planning and land use in your city hall or village hall, town hall. They maintain your office records, apply for funding, and often are the first line talking to the public when they come into your office. The only thing I would say here is if you're on a zoning board of appeals, you should have a professional relationship with your zoning enforcement officer, but you should not be turning to them for advice and technical assistance. If you need technical assistance, really, you're welcome to reach out to anybody in your own municipality. Like if you have a planner, you're welcome to reach out to your county planners for assistance. You can reach out to us at the Department of State for assistance. But really, if you're like the zoning board of appeals, should really have kind of an arm's length relationship with their zoning enforcement officer. And now I think it goes back over to Ebony to talk about site visits.
Yes, thank you. So site visits are a good way to get your bearings and see how a site works in person, how it doesn't work, in real life. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is visiting a site, walking the earth and seeing, how it feels, what are the contextual factors that you need to be thinking about when it comes to reviewing what is being proposed for that site. You know, what's happening on this street, what's happening next door or behind the site. Again, getting a feel for how the site works will be of benefit to you if, you know, when it's time to review the application. The purpose of the site visit is to just observe. It is not an opportunity for you to make a decision or compare notes with colleagues or snoop for some people. That does happen, but no, it's just to observe. There should be no conversation about, you know, different features of the site. Yes, you're there to visit and to observe it, but you are not there to deliberate and compare notes, things like that. And as a result, it's really a better idea, a best practice to just go in groups of no more than 2 people at a time. Again, because you want to avoid the appearance of impropriety. You want to avoid not only, well, I'll say it this way. You don't want to make a quorum. You don't want to have so many of you on the site, half of you or a little bit more than half or what have you, that makes there be a quorum. And because if you have a quorum, you should be at a meeting, right? It would be considered a meeting. And if you don't have not provided notice to the public and provided the public with an opportunity to be there with you as you review the site, then you have made a big no-no, right? And so again, it makes sense to just either go individually or in groups of no more than 2 people, again, because you do not want to achieve a quorum. You'll want to keep your comments to yourself and take notes, but not discuss what you find with your colleagues until the day you will be reviewing it as a group at the meeting. You also want to follow up with staff if you are fortunate enough to have them. If you have comments or questions about your observations, you also want to avoid taking comments and questions from passersby or neighbors during site visits. You know, it is not uncommon to walk a site and, you know, have someone across the fence that wants to give you the scoop or ask you questions about what's supposed to be happening on that site. You're not to really interact with other people, you're just there to observe. So if that were to happen, just direct them to the public meeting or hearing, you know, say, oh, you know, if you have questions, we'll be talking about this at XYZ date. I can't talk about this right now, or really at all outside of that public meeting. So feel free to come by and, you know, you'll learn all that you need there. Again, because this could be viewed as ex parte communication, and it's not, again, it may all be innocent. The person that may be asking you a question from next door may not know that it's inappropriate, but it's your job, because you know that it's inappropriate, to make it clear that if they want more information, they should contact the office or come to them or come to the meeting. And you can, and it's easy to do that in a polite way. Next, Paula. And you want to have an organized approach when it comes to these site visits. So you can, so it would be a good idea, I'll say, to consider dividing the site visit into maybe kind of 2, or the review rather, into 2 different categories. Like one category could be looking at what's on the parcel itself. So you're looking at the terrain, the presence of any natural buffers. You'll want to consider the proposed developments, connection to any existing structures on the site. You want to take a look at, you know, what the traffic, not on the parcel, the existing curb cuts are on the property. Is there a presence of a driveway already, or will they need new curb cuts? You want to review any internal roadways if they exist, but you also want to, you know, consider another category, which is the part of the site, well, not the site, but you want to take a look at the area that surrounds the parcel itself. So the adjacent uses, you want to take a look at the views from the site and onto the site from different points. Any impacts, you know, what's happening next door? You know, is there a vista that is being disrupted by the proposed construction of this development? Are there any valuable views that are present? Are there any sensitive or protected uses next door that you need to be mindful of, like a daycare or a school or something of that nature? A quick and dirty tip would be to remember to bring your application checklist, assuming that you have one. If you don't have one, I strongly recommend that you create one. Hopefully you have one. But if you have that with you, you can just go down that checklist to make sure that you're reviewing or that you're looking at everything that you would need to evaluate when it's time to make a decision, right? So if on that checklist you have parking or lighting or landscaping, you can go across the site and just kind of review the existing status of the property when it comes to those matters, and then write down questions or notes or comments that you have about it so that those can be addressed in the meeting or just on the application in general. So it's just another way to be organized and to be diligent and to have, you know, everything that you need so that you can make an informed decision on the decision day. And also, it's also a good idea to kind of have an idea of what you want to see on the property before you actually get there. I usually had specific things that I wanted to observe on the site that were specific to either just the location or the use that was proposed to be there, or maybe something that already existed nearby that I wanted to judge and see, you know, whether there would be a relationship between that, like, or a conflict or something between that existing thing and what was being proposed. So it's just an idea. You should, you know, be prepared. And that's one way to do it. Next slide, please. Here are some other questions that you can consider. You know, is there common vegetation or trees in the community? You know, and that's important because you may want to maintain that character, right? You may say, okay, there's old growth trees here and a lot of, I don't know, I can't think of a type of shrub, but maybe there's, you know, the properties are surrounded by cypress trees or a certain type of shrub or holly shrubs or something like that. And maybe that's kind of a theme in that area of the community. Maybe we should ensure that this development should have that as well. That may be a note that you put to yourself as you do your site visit. You know, you may look at, you know, what's the nearest public road intersection? Is it easy or hard to get through as it is? You know, are they requesting additional curb cuts? How will that impact traffic in this area or the existing traffic in this area? Are there sidewalks? Are they in good condition? Of course, sidewalks are going to be in the purview of the municipality to address, but if there's internal sidewalks to the site, maybe what they're proposing is an expansion to an existing site or a total changeover in use or something of that nature with some physical expansions. Maybe there's internal sidewalks that you need to evaluate. You know, again, these are just a few questions that you may want to consider as you do your site visit. And ex parte communication. Oh, and you know what, can you go back one more, go back to the last slide, Paula. One thing I forgot to mention, in general, again, you want to go to the site with either by yourself or maybe with one other person from your board, and you may encounter people from the public who may want to ask questions and things of that nature. But also, you should avoid being what I call hosted by the applicant, where they want to escort you through the property and explain to you their vision and all of that. That's a great effort at hospitality. That's a great effort at trying to be transparent on the part of the applicant. However, that puts you in a difficult position, right? Because we did talk about ex parte communication, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more in the next slide. But you know, you want to avoid the appearance of being influenceable, right? Because it'll be hard for that host or that applicant to be circumspect, and it'll be hard for you to avoid appearing influenceable and polite at the same time. So just avoid those kind of opportunities or situations when they arise. Just very politely decline, and you know, schedule a time to be there when you will not be accompanied by or need to be, or if they're there, you won't have to be escorted by them through the site. Okay, next slide. So ex parte communication. Yes, ex parte communication. This is when a board member is contacted outside of a public meeting. Again, me and Paula have talked about this a bunch of times so far already. That could be either in person, it could be via phone, it can be email, it could be passenger pigeon, whatever. It doesn't really matter. If you're being contacted by someone about a matter that's going to be on your agenda or is currently on the agenda outside of a public meeting, it's better to decline to talk to them about it and just let them know, hey, I can't talk about this here with you either in this manner. It has to be in the public realm. So just save your questions for the public meeting, which is coming up on XYZ day. Please attend, you know, that kind of thing. Again, because this can frame, if someone else sees that, it can frame perceptions about not only your integrity, but the integrity of the process. And you want to avoid that appearance of a conflict of interest. So, you know, when these conversations arise or these opportunities for conversations arise, you can just kind of shut them down with a polite referral to staff. You can say, hey, you know, just follow up with staff. They'll give you the information that you're looking for. Or again, attend the meeting. We'll be happy to answer your questions at that time. And Paula, I think it's back to you.
Great, thanks. All right, so some of the basics about being in the meeting itself. We'll start with open meetings law, which we've talked about a couple of times. So a public meeting is the official convening of a public body for the purpose of conducting the public's business. This is where you need to have a quorum to have a public meeting. And meetings allow the public to listen and observe their governmental functions, but it doesn't open up the door to comment as well. And if you're a community that does allow comment, the problem with doing that is as soon as you open it up to one person, you have to open it up to everyone. So we like to say public meetings are where you really should focus on doing the work. And then when you need to hear from the public, that's the purpose of a public hearing. And that is the official proceeding of a governmental body or officer during which the public is accorded the right to be heard. And who is the public? And that is anybody with a heartbeat. They don't have to live in your community. They don't have to speak English. They are just given the right to speak. They are required for all zoning board of appeals matters. So our ZBA members with us today should be well versed on public hearings. And they are required for some planning board matters like subdivisions, special use permits, and site plan review if it's required locally. And of course, we're still in COVID-19, so it's important to just touch upon this. Remote public meetings are allowed until January 15th of 2022. This was done, I think in September via special session of the legislature with Governor Hochul. And this is important because, you know, we still have COVID floating around. Some people are not, you know, comfortable with going to public places and participating in public places as well. But also, before the pandemic, you were allowed to participate as long as you were seen and viewed and it was open to the public. So sometimes we'll have people, you know, some people will snowbird in the winter in the South. So they'll go down, but they still want to participate in the board meetings, and they can so long as they video chat in so you can see their face, but they also have to open their homes wherever their location is to the public. Currently, you don't have to do that. You don't have to open your house to the public if you participate via, you know, Zoom or WebEx. But you do need to record your proceedings, and the proceedings have to be transcribed later on. There's no, like, it doesn't have to be like next week. There's really no time frame on that. It's just they have to be transcribed. And really, I think a lot of communities have taken really the best practice approach, which is if you have the ability to hold your meetings both in person and online, take the hybrid approach. So people who aren't comfortable attending in person can still participate. However, if you're a community that maybe doesn't have great high-speed internet, then allow written comment that can be read into the record. And of course, to keep up to date on all open meetings updates, because it also updated last week, like I said earlier, about putting all of your application materials online to the extent practicable, at least 24 hours before the meeting. These are things that you can keep up to date with our colleagues at the Committee on Open Government, and that is where you find them. I also see in the chat room, our town board and planning board have the privilege of the floor at every meeting. Is that a bad idea? Okay, so not usually, because usually you probably don't have something really controversial before you. So it does allow people to at least, if there's an issue, they can bring up that issue with you. The problem is the minute you open the door to one person, you open the door to everyone. So if it's something that's controversial before your board, you can't just say, Polly or Sue can speak, but we don't want to hear from Michelle and David. So a lot of times you might have an opportunity for people to make, comments, but if you have a lot of issues on the plate and a lot of business to get through, I would say it's probably best to focus your public meetings on just getting through your agenda, because you can often get off track pretty easily sometimes. And conducting public hearings, a really good tip that we always kind of put out there is putting the rules of the road on the back of your agenda so everybody knows what to expect. And when you're conducting these public hearings, you should be courteous and careful of your body language. A lot of how you sit there can tell people how you're feeling about a particular application. And you can ask speakers to identify themselves, but you cannot force people to identify themselves and provide that information. And really the issue here is it's an issue of privacy, but also because their comment is more important, not really who it's coming from. So just keep in mind, you're welcome to ask people to provide, sometimes some communities people will say, I'm XYZ neighbor and I live at XYZ drive. You're welcome to, they're welcome to provide that, but don't require that. And sometimes in your service, you will be working with consultants, and that includes planners, engineers, architects, surveyors, attorneys, probably other people I don't have on that list. And these professionals are sometimes available to answer questions from the review board. They might be on retainer for your community. They might just be there to help you through a specific application. And you got to remember that if you're the one paying for the consultants, they work for you. And they can certainly help your review board make better decisions, but you want to establish a lead contact and check in regularly. So if you're looking to hire somebody for updating your comprehensive plan, they're going to send, most likely a lot of consultants are going to send their A-game person. You want to make sure that whoever is coming before you to pitch your community, is that actually going to be the person that you'll be working with throughout the process? If it's not, you want to meet the people that who are going to be on your project team. And evaluate the work at several intervals. Don't just wait to the last final stage, because if you're not happy, halfway through, most likely, the consultant wants to know that you're not happy so that they can improve and be better for you. It just kind of keeps from less headaches for everybody overall if you don't just wait to the end. And make sure that you notice any red flags if they're missing deadlines or what they're sending you is maybe not of the best quality that you were expecting, if they're avoiding your contact. And again, address those issues, sooner than later. Don't just wait until the end of the process to let them know that you're unhappy. And before we move on from this, there's the professional project review services. Review costs can be charged to the applicant if it's locally authorized. That is through the Office of the State Comptroller Opinion 90-14, and local regulations can specify either pre-established fees or it might be a possible municipal budget item through your municipality. And sometimes this is helpful if you need training for maybe there's an application, a telecommunications application that comes before your board, and you aren't, you don't have a radio frequency wave, engineer on staff or in your community at all. So this might be a way in which you can hire that person, and they can certainly help you through a specific application. And again, address those issues, sooner than later. Don't just wait until the end of the process to let them know that you're unhappy. to give you the assistance that you need to make good decisions in your community, and then you charge it back to the applicant. So that's always a good idea, because sometimes, you know, most planning and zoning board members are lay people, so you might not have the expertise of an application that's before you. So really the question is, like, the point here is to ask for assistance when you need it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Oh, and look at that. Don't be afraid to ask questions, which Ebony's going to talk to you all about.
Right. It's better to ask, especially in this case, it's better to ask than it is to make misinformed decisions with a long shelf life. You know, these are decisions that are going to have an impact in your community for a long time, potentially even have ripple effects. And so, again, you want to come to the table ready to make an informed decision, and you do that by asking questions where they arise for you. You're a lay person, you know, while you're expected to learn in your service, you are not expected to be an expert. And that's, you know, it's totally okay. It is okay to request legal assistance or other assistance from staff, just like what Paula was mentioning, from consultants or from your municipal attorney, Department of State, any staff, if you have them. It's perfectly, excuse me, well within your rights to do that. You're a lay person. You're not an expert on your community. I mean, in planning in general, but you are an expert in your community. That you're an expert on the character of your community. You're an expert on the history or recent history of your community. And so that, plus the willingness to ask questions, plus your application of the laws and comprehensive plan, is what arms you to make good decisions. And asking questions is a big part of that. Next slide. You also want to be, are you having a problem too? Okay. You also want to be clear and direct with applicants. And that's with regard to interpreting a decision that you've made, like giving them a decision on an application, and then, you know, defining what that means to them in real world terms. The applicant will appreciate it, even if your regulations hold applicants to a high standard. Sometimes, you know, you'll find applicants or developers or whomever, property owners, you know, feel that the process can be expensive, and conditions applied to an approval may also add to the expenses that they have. And then, of course, time also is money, so that can be expensive too. But if the regulations are holding everyone to a high and equal standard, you gain the respect of the applicants and the folks in the development and business community. Clear regulations and clear directives make it easier for them to move forward too. So even if they don't agree with the recommendation or the decision that was provided by the board, even if they disagree, at least they will know what they can do to move forward. So please be clear and direct. The process can be, you know, at times frustrating for applicants. And that's especially true when decisions and their rationales are not made clear. But that's when questions about, you know, encouraging development and being business friendly and being fair get more airtime, you know, when decisions are not and their rationale are not clear. So again, just be clear, try to explain in basic terms, you know, what the decision means and how they can move forward from there, whether that be moving forward with conditions or applying to another board for waivers or whatever that means in each particular instance. Next slide, please. Even if you have a few applications, you know, every now and then, like you don't have a full docket every month or what have you, I guarantee you at some point, there will be one that comes through that has a lot of public interest, and you may have to interact with the media as a result of all of the public interest surrounding that matter. If you don't have a media plan in your rules and procedures, you might want to consider developing one, particularly one that lays out how you will handle questions and comments from the media. Like, for instance, who's going to be the spokesperson? Will it be delegated to one person or will it be multiple people? It should actually be one person, but in general, it will, you know, your plan will incorporate details like that. You'll decide on whether you're going to respond to comments or questions via phone, press release, news conference, things of that sort. Even if the matter is controversial, most reporters really are not experts in municipal law or activities or land use law. So talking about an application or a regulation with a person from the media gives them provides an opportunity to educate as well as inform, right? This conversation doesn't have to be adversarial. In my experience, it's a two-way street. You get to disseminate accurate information and clarify issues that may have been muddied by public opinion. And then the media professional gets information direct from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and they get to have a better understanding of the process and regulations going forward. So it can be a win-win. Next slide, please. Okay, making your decision stick. Next slide. Okay, voting considerations. Now we talked about the importance of a quorum, and I think we're running out of time, so I'll be quick on this. You need a quorum in order to vote, right? So that's the majority plus, no, not the majority. It's the majority of the board present in order to take a vote on an application. You have to do that at the meeting itself. You cannot have a proxy. You can't have a email or a call in or a fax or what have you, letting people know what your vote is on that. You need to be present if your vote is going to count. If a member is going to recuse, they should leave the room, and the record should show why they are recusing. Remember, you want to note it for the record because you want it to be understood both today and in any time in the future that in this particular matter, you recused yourself and you left the room, and it's noted in the record. You also want to make sure that alternates are available to vote in your place if you recuse yourself, and that they're up to speed. That alternate should also, when they get up there, they should make it known for the record that they are up to speed on the matter and are prepared, fully prepared to vote. Next slide, please. Findings. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but basically findings are an important part of the record. They basically connect the application's details to the code's requirements or your regulations requirements, and then lay out the rationale for the board's decision. And of course, any related conditions that will be applied, right? This is imperative information, both to the application itself and for the applicant, so that they can have a record of what was considered with regard to their application and why the decision was what it was. Next slide, please. And the record is a collection of all the evidence that the board was given to do its review, right? So that should include the application, any plans or drawings, etc., any correspondence between the applicant and staff or people that, like the town clerk or whoever that may have interacted with them as a result of the application. Of course, the public hearing notice, because you want to make it clear that there was a notice sent out and the public was invited to learn more about the application. Of course, any written comments from members of the public, any other records that may be related to the matter. And then, of course, the decision that the board made and their findings, those details that, again, lay out the rationale for the board's decision and connect them to the details of the application and the code. Next slide, please. Oh, I think this is you, Paula.
Yep, this is how we just finished with some practical advice to finish our course. The basics, attend your meetings and be on time, read those application materials in minutes before the meeting so that when you get to the meeting, you're ready to work. Seek, your staff assistance before the meeting if you have questions. You're always welcome to reach out to Jason and the staff at GFL for assistance. You're always welcome to reach out to us at the Department of State as well if there's, a process that you're just not too familiar with. And of course, be familiar with your sites and the projects before your board. In your meetings, you want to make sure that you understand your comprehensive plan and your zoning law. Focus on those facts, not your own personal opinions. I mean, again, just, land use board members are really required to take your local regulations and make those decisions based upon them. There's not a ton of wiggle room, even though the public might think that there is wiggle room there. Really, if there's something that, if there's a controversial use before you and it's allowed by the zoning, there's not a whole lot you can do to turn it down. So, you know, your governing board is really there to change those regulations if things aren't working for your community, even though people might still take it out on you, unfortunately. Participate in the discussion. You know, you want to be probing and ask good questions, but don't be argumentative, especially with controversial applications. Some people get worked up. They love their community for a reason. You should love your community as well, since you're volunteering most of the time, your time to serve your community. So you're all passionate about why you love your community. So a lot of times people can sometimes be passionate out loud. So it's sometimes important to, you know, keep that in mind as well. So be respectful of everyone. Stick to the agenda and your schedule. It's just respectful to you and to all the applicants that are spending, you know, money to come before you. And in meetings, you know, you want to be practical. You want to respect your associates. We hate to hear when, you know, there's infighting in boards. We work with the Department of State. We've heard it all. You know, so try to focus on being a problem solver, not a problem maker. Be very conscious of your body language with people. And of course, it should go without saying, but, you know, treat everybody equally and make sure that the rules are equal for everyone. Like in a hearing, if everybody gets 3 minutes to speak in a hearing, make sure that everybody gets 3 minutes, even if people don't necessarily use all 3 minutes. Oh, and don't do that whole, like, I give my time, I yield my time to other people. You don't have to allow for that in your community. It just pops in my head. Like, I think personally that's kind of lame. So you don't have to allow for people to yield their time to somebody else. Really, you should be hearing from the community themselves. And just some words of wisdom, you know, be patient with applicants, the process, and the public. It can be very difficult a lot of the time. You know, be persistent because you're serving your community, but be respectful. Don't make it personal. We hate to hear when people just get nasty with each other. It doesn't do anybody any help. You know, it just makes things difficult for all involved. Be transparent, follow the spirit of the open meetings law. Always remember sunshine and know the law. Again, be passionate about your community. You should know why you're, you know, volunteering your time, because you know why your community is special. And of course, when you can, have fun, you know, be a cheerleader for your community. You are the ones, you know, you're gatekeepers. You want what's best for your own community. And lastly, here are some sources of assistance, as well as we hear in the chat box here. So always feel free to reach out to, you know, your local staff, your regional staff. They're so important. They're great people to work with. They're very knowledgeable. It's always a pleasure for us to work with our county and regional planners. We really do love working with them. And again, thank you for your time. I think we have about 2 minutes. If people have any questions, they can certainly put it in there. And I wanted to give Jason some opportunity to put any last minute words in there too.
Thank you, Paula and Ebony. This is fantastic. This is so much great information. I really like this this course. So hopefully all of you folks attending today got some good information out of it. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat room at this point. And also kudos to Paula and Ebony for getting this down to exactly 1.5 hours. So I'll leave the meeting open for a little bit if there's any last final questions. Paul and Ebony, if you'd like to say a few words in conclusion. Otherwise, thank you for attending, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having us. We appreciate
Definitely.
it. And thank you to everybody who volunteers their time to sit on their boards and come get training. It's super
absolutely.
Well.
I get paid to do a lot of this stuff, and I'm just so in awe of the concerned citizen, the volunteers that sit on these land use boards and put such hard, thoughtful work into their decisions. It's you do a great service to your communities. So thank you all out there.
Absolutely, great words to end on.
All right. Well, like I said, I'll keep things open for a few more minutes, but you are all free to go. Thank you so much.